Need your daily fix on mixed martial arts?
We're going to kind of recap Bellator 155.
From UFC 198.
Who's who?
Kind of a controversial decision.
And who's not?
I couldn't figure out why, and then it hit me.
Well, don't you fret, because Golden State Media Concepts got you covered. Get your daily dose of MMA podcast. Everything from the UFC, Bellator Fighting Championships, Extreme Cage Fighting, Invicta Fighting Championships, and so much more. Join us as we talk about some of the biggest names in mixed martial arts. We've got you covered here on Golden State Media Concepts MMA Podcast.
All right, now, thank you for tuning in to the Golden State Media Concepts Mixed Martial Arts Podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Tate. And how's everybody doing out there today? I'm actually doing pretty darn good after coming off a spectacular weekend. It was kind of fun. Watched a little martial arts, watched the UFC Fight Night in London featuring Manuwa and Corey Anderson. Cut my lawn, of course, which for most of you people that's out on the East Coast, cutting your lawn just does not even sound like a possibility, because it seems like everyone on the East Coast is getting hammered with snow. So that's one of the big benefits about living in California. I always tell everyone the great thing about living in Northern California is snow is something that you go to play in, and then you come back home. I grew up in the Cleveland, Ohio area, so I know what I'm talking about. Cleveland in the wintertime is not fun, and when it snows in the springtime, it's even worse. Anyway, so back to what we're talking about here. We're going to get on to talking about that UFC Fight Night in London card. Jimi Manuwa made a huge statement. He has now inserted himself into the light heavyweight pitcher. We're also going to talk about Gunnar Nelson and his big win over Alan Jouban. We're going to talk about Brad Pickett and his last fight in the UFC, and in general in his career, as this is his last fight of all time. And then we're going to talk about Marc who also had another spectacular win. So when we come back, we're gonna dive right into it. Stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Okay, so this weekend, this Saturday, we had the UFC Fight Night, Manuwa versus Anderson. And I just want to start off by talking about how a lot of experts, and I don't really consider myself an expert, but I definitely consider myself someone who really pays a lot of attention to mixed martial arts. But not a lot of people were really excited about this UFC Fight Night card in London. To me, it felt like that the UFC had just kind of put together a C- card, C+ at best card, they were just going to put it on, and they just put it on Fight Pass a way to do an event in London and showcase a lot of British fighters, but didn't have much oomph. As a matter of fact, when this card was initially announced, I kept waiting on who's going to be the headliner. And when I found out it was going to be Manuwa and Corey Anderson, I was just a little disappointed. So I'm thinking, like, there has to be, at least another, equally, eye-catching undercard. And I was kind of disappointed. And a lot of other guys talked about how was not expecting great things from this card. The one thing that the UFC has consistently done, and that is, it's rare that this does not happen. Whenever you look at a UFC card and you're like, man, this is gonna be a snooze fest. This is not gonna be a great card every single time. All the fighters tend to rise to the occasion. This was an amazing card. I really enjoyed this card. It had some great fights. It had some spectacular finishes. And so, once again, a card that I didn't have very high regard for. I ended up watching it the first time and then went back and watched it the second time, and I loved every bit of it. So this was definitely a card that surprised me. And the biggest surprise of them all was the main event, which was Jimi Manuwa versus Corey Anderson. And I had taken Corey in this fight. I thought Corey was going to win this fight. I thought he had great hands. He had superior, ground game, excellent ground and pound. I thought he was tailor-made to beat Jimi Manuwa. And I'll tell you what, I was absolutely wrong. Jimi Manuwa came in and he put his presence known right away. He was like a stalking lion in that ring as he slowly started walking down Corey. It was kind of funny because, I was looking at this fight and Corey was throwing a lot of punches and he was trying to move a lot and he was trying to stay out of range, and Jimi Manuwa was very efficient with his moves. You hear Conor McGregor talking about being efficient in the ring. Well, Jimi Manuwa was incredibly efficient in the ring. He slowly kind of crept down and kept on walking down Corey Anderson as Corey kept moving, and then eventually, once he got in range, he nailed him, and it was a walk off. He threw the shot, it landed, and that fight was over. Manuwa knew he didn't have to throw another punch. He didn't have to dive on him. He didn't have to do anything. Corey was gone and he was asleep. I was impressed. He really, really walked him down. So they ended up winning with a first round knockout. And, I was kind of, when I looked at the fight and went back the second time, you can't be nothing but impressed by what Jimi Manuwa had done. I had said this beforehand that in the light heavyweight division, the two heaviest hands in that division belongs to Rumble Johnson and Jimi Manuwa. And after that fight, it still rings true. There is no one other than Rumble who can land a punch quite like Manuwa. And he really set himself up. And after the fight, I thought he had a misstep there. After the fight, he had when he was talking about what was next for him, he said he wanted the winner of DC and Rumble. And I can understand why he wants that, but it's just one step too far. I think the biggest and then the other mistake that he made is that he said he wanted to fight David Hayes. it's sad, but guys need to come up with their own stick. And what I mean by that is David Hayes is a former cruiserweight, former heavyweight boxing champion. Matter of fact, he's the only other champion other than Evander Holyfield to unify the cruiserweight and heavyweight division. And he's a big star in the UK. And from everything I understand, that would be the biggest fight you could put together in London, would be a Jimi Manuwa versus David Hayes fight. But the UFC is not going to allow this fight to happen. And too many guys are coming out and I feel like they're all copying Conor McGregor. It's like Conor McGregor came out with the secret sauce. You got to wear the suits. You got to call out the fighters. You got to call out a boxing guy. And it's like, it's already been done. Do something new. There's too many guys that are just, I feel like, copying McGregor a day late. And so that was kind of the big mistake that I thought Jimi Manuwa made. Because with him being ranked number 4 in the light heavyweight division, and you look around and you say, okay, what's going on in the light heavyweight division? You got Rumble and DC and DC. They're about to fight. You have Glover Teixeira, Glover Teixeira and Gufferson. They're about to fight. So the guys in front of you, they're all tied up. And so what happens here is by asking for Rumble versus the winner of Rumble versus DC, that's never going to happen. Under no circumstances, unless an injury happens, are you going to get the next fight. There's a guy named John Bones Jones, that is out there who is in line for that next fight. And then the next thing is asking to fight the former cruiserweight, former heavyweight champion in boxing, which is something that it may be a big fight in the UK, but it's not a big fight in the US or anywhere else. So that fight's not going to happen. So he kind of put himself kind of in a bad place. I think what he should have done is made the smart move. And that is, he should have called out John Bones Jones. And here's the reason why. Manuwa versus John Jones is a fight that could happen. John Jones is coming back this summer. Manuwa would be in perfect condition, perfect situation to have that fight. John Jones may want to get a fight in before he fights the winner of Cormier or Rumble. So Manuwa would be the perfect guy for him to fight. It would be that opportunity for him to fight. If he can pull off a win against John Jones, he's the next guy to get a title shot. He jumps over Teixeira. He jumps over Gustafsson. He jumps over everyone if he pulls off a win against John Jones. He could get that fight. Now winning against John Jones, that's a whole different ball game. But it was the perfect fight for him to call out. The second thing that I thought was a misstep, because it was a perfect night for him except for his missteps. Then going as far as to say, I was a little surprised by the statement. And Jimi Manuwa has always been a classy guy, and I respect him. So don't misunderstand what I'm saying when I say these things. I just think he made a few missteps after his spectacular knockout. He even went as far as to say that no, he does not want to fight John Jones. John Jones is a cheater. He's a steroid user, making emphatic that he has no interest in fighting John Jones. Well, in MMA, in the light heavyweight division, the biggest payday you can find is fighting John Jones. And he was set up to take the biggest fight on record would be to fight John Jones. Even as far as money goes, he'd make more money fighting John Jones than he would fighting Cormier or Rumble Johnson, in my opinion. So I thought he made a huge misstep by going and kind of brushing off and saying no interest in Jon Jones. So that's one of the things I thought he made a big mistake on. Now, with this fight, Corey Anderson took a huge. I mean, he took a huge defeat. And I look at this fight, and I went back and watched it a second time, and I was watching Corey Anderson, and I'm thinking, he made a few mistakes in this fight as well. He tried to be very busy, and he tried to move a lot, and he tried to stick and move, but his punches were, I felt like there were more arm punches. There was not he wasn't kind of sitting down on his punches because it seemed like he was so worried about Manuwa's power, which apparently he was right to be worried about the power. But Manuwa was just walking him down. So every once in a while you got to sit down on your punches and deliver something that's going to cause damage that will keep Manuwa off of you and keep him honest and keep him being worried about you hitting him. Corey did not do that. They weren't dangerous punches that he was throwing. His takedown attempts were bad. I thought his takedown attempts were not a real threat, and Jimi Manuwa handled him easily. So Manuwa was not really worried about him taking him down. He wasn't really worried about a power shot coming in. And then the other thing that I thought, because the way Manuwa was walking him down in a conventional stance, he was open for the leg kick. And I thought, leg kick him, that'll keep him, it'll keep him from sitting down on his punches and delivering so much power. So I thought that Corey Anderson should have delivered a lot more leg kicks. Instead, I don't remember a leg kick that he threw. Matter of fact, I don't even remember a true takedown attempt that was really anything that was remotely close to a threat to take down Jimi Manuwa. So because he wasn't working, there was no leg kicks, there was no power punches that could keep him honest, there was no takedowns that were going to make him worry. Manuwa could just keep on pressing and pressing. And eventually, you're going to, if you have a guy with a lot of power and he has nothing to worry about except for walking you down, you're going to go to sleep, just like Corey Anderson did. So it was that part was disappointing because I thought Corey would put up a much better fight. This fight could have really put him a chance to get into the bigger money fight. Instead, he put up a lackluster performance, which then is really which kind of moved him out of the mix. But back to Jimi Manuwa. Jimi Manuwa is in it. In pretty much a situation, Manuwa's going to have to take another fight. If let's say if Glover Teixeira beats Gustafsson, and that's a tall order, I could see Teixeira and Manuwa fighting next. I don't really see a Gustafsson and Manuwa fight happening anytime soon. They've gotten to be pretty tight nowadays, so I don't see another fight of them happening. So I think, and then he's already ruled out Jon Jones, so he can't wait for a title shot because Cormier versus Rumble, if Cormier wins, Cormier is going to want Jon Jones immediately. If Rumble wins, you're going to get either a rematch between DC and Rumble, or you're going to get DC versus Jon Jones. So it really puts him in a bad place where he's still 1 to 2 fights away from getting into that title picture. So, that's why I thought calling out Jon Jones really could jump him ahead of the line, because, I figured Jon would take a tune-up fight before DC or before Rumble, and it really and that puts him right in the title picture and right in the mix. So, but that concludes our talk on the main event. When we come back, we're going to talk about some of the other fights on this card, because it was spectacular. Some of these fights were worth watching. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and One Championship. We got the fights covered. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Okay, so we were just covering the Jimi Manuwa Corey Anderson fight, and we were just talking about how Manuwa came off with a spectacular knockout, and it was a spectacular knockout. It was a walk-off shot, and we talked about how he had decided not to call out Jon Jones, and he decided not to go after Jon Jones whatsoever, but to try to ask for a title shot next in the winner of DC versus Rumble, which I thought was a big misstep. Now, on some of the other cards, I'm going to skip the co-main, and I'm going to go to a really great thing that happened on this card. And the question comes up: when does getting knocked out and beaten a good thing? And the first thing that comes to mind is never. Well, that actually happened this card. Brad Pickett, who has been a staple in the UFC and the mixed martial arts world for years, he comes to the ring. He has the hat and everything. He's unmistakable. He's been a warrior in the ring for many years. British fighter, and this was going to be his last fight, as he was going to be retiring and spending more time with his family. He's at that age now where it's time to start thinking about, other things, greener pastures, than to keep fighting in the UFC. And so he was fighting in his hometown in London, and he really, the fight came on, and he's fighting Marlon Vera. And the first round, he's looking good. I mean, he's on point. He's looking good. He clearly, in my opinion, won that round 10-9. Round 2, kind of the same thing. He's really pressing. He's really putting on a pretty decent show. Vera's putting up a decent, he's competing, but it is definitely Brad Pickett's night. And then the third round happens, and again, Pickett is pressing. It's you look at it and you're saying there's less than 2 minutes left in this fight, and he's going to have one spectacular celebration as he's going to close out his career with a 3 rounds to none shutout. And then out of nowhere, Vera nails him with a shot, and he is done. I mean, he is done. And it was initially I was very sad for Brad Pickett because leading up to this, it meant so much to him to be fighting in London and in front of his friends and family, and it was going to be his last fight, and for him to get knocked out, and it was really sad. But the crowd was cheering him, and he was very disappointed. But the crowd, it didn't matter that he had lost. The crowd was there to appreciate everything he had done in the ring all the years leading up to this fight. So the outcome, win, lose, or draw, did not matter to him, to the people of London. They just wanted to show their respect. And then Vera, I think he was the cherry on top of the sundae of this particular event, where he gave a tearful speech as he talked about how Brad Pickett had meant a lot to him, and how he was a big fan of Brad Pickett, and how he wanted the crowd to cheer for him. And literally, he's in tears as he's praising a guy that he clearly looked up to. And it ended up being a situation where Brad Pickett got knocked out in spectacular fashion, and he was a star of that moment. And the crowd was cheering, and then Brad Pickett gives his speech, and he talks about how he understands that the referee had a job to do, and he respected that, and he's always been a classy guy. But he said he would have died in the ring than give up or be knocked out that night. But the referee, had stopped it, and it was the right stoppage. It was the perfect time to stop this fight. But it was just an amazing, heartfelt event that happened. And then in the end, he took his hat off. That he's, that's his. That's what he's known for, is the hat that he comes to the ring in. And he took the hat, and the last thing you see with him is he puts the hat down in the ring, and he walks out, and the ring is empty with just his hat in the ring, and all the fans as he's walking out, the fans are hugging him and just giving their appreciation of what a great guy he has been. And what a great ambassador he's been to the UFC and the mixed martial arts world. And I was very proud to have watched that fight. I was proud of the way the audience and the crowd had reacted to it. You can't be down on a night like that. Even when you lose, you win. It was a win-win situation for him, and I applaud him, and I applaud the British fans for really coming out and supporting their guy. So that was a spectacular fight for the outcome, because a young fighter gets his first big break against a big star, but the old road warrior still gets his due. So everyone wins in this situation, and I absolutely loved it. So then we're going to talk about another fight on this card, and that was Gunnar Nelson versus Alan Jouban. Gunnar Nelson, both of these fighters, I was really looking forward to this fight, because both of these guys, I think, has lots of potential to. They're not contending for the title right now, but they could get into the mix, the welterweight mix down the road with a couple or more wins. And so it was a really good fight, and it was actually a close fight in the first round. But the second round, Gunnar Nelson showed why he has serious power. You can never underestimate Gunnar Nelson. Gunnar Nelson, he tagged Jouban with a right hand on the chin, and Jouban was done. He was absolutely done. and he jumps on him. Gunnar Nelson jumps on him, puts him in a guillotine choke, and he taps out. I was kind of surprised. I mean, Gunnar Nelson did one thing that I think a lot of fighters make a mistake on. When you have a guy hurt, don't go for the submission, go for the knockout. But in his case, it worked perfectly. Most times when I think about Alistair and Stipe Miocic and going for the submission. The most times if you got a guy hurt, I think about Tyron Woodley versus Wonder Boy. Don't go for the submission, finish him off. But in this case, it actually worked well. Jouban tapped out, and it was a spectacular win for a very tough, rugged Gunnar Nelson, which is going to really put him in a really good place. So this was a really great night for him. And then the last fight I'm going to talk about, Joe Duffy also, before I get to my last fight, Joe Duffy also had a unanimous decision, a pretty easy decision as well. On all cards, he won 30-27, a pretty easy win. But there was one fight, and there was a lot of spectacular knockouts. But the spectacular knockout of the night for me was Marc Diakiese. And Marc Diakiese is this young fighter. He's now 12-0. It was like watching a video game with Marc Diakiese when he got to the ring. First off, he came to the ring, and no fighter looked like he enjoyed the pre-prep of getting to the ring and being in the ring as Marc Diakiese. Marc Diakiese enjoyed every second of this fight. And this is before they ever touched gloves, before they ever threw a punch. He was enjoying himself. Most times I always like to watch a fighter when they come to the ring. I always like to watch them in the weigh-in and see what they look like. You can kind of tell what a mindset of a fighter, what a fighter's mindset is. You can also tell, did he have a good camp? Did he have a good weight cut? But when you watch Marc Diakiese, it looked like everything was perfect for him. Like the stars had aligned. And when the fight started, it was the most impressive, I don't know, I'm thinking it was like 30 seconds I have seen a fighter put up. I can't remember a better 30 seconds of a first round. He just really jumped on him. He had some, I don't even know if you want to say flying switch kick in there. He had some spectacular moves, and then he ended it with a spectacular shot that just put his opponent out. And it was just spectacular. Then from there, there was no reason to jump on him. The referee jumped on him right away because this fight was over. From there, he went into a nice little dance. He enjoyed himself. This guy had a great night. It's his third fight in a row that he's won in less than a minute. And he asked what was next for him, and he said he wanted to fight on that Swedish card that's coming up soon. This guy is a star. Marc Diakiese is an absolute star. My only concern, because of how he's winning, and he's not afraid of anybody. He will fight anyone at any time. I'm hoping that the UFC will protect him from himself right now, because this kid is going to be a mega star as long as you don't put him in the ring, move him up the ladder too fast, because he has spectacular knockouts. He has spectacular moves. This is a guy that can get a country behind him and can get a lot of people to follow him. He is a fun, energetic, it's weird to call someone a dynamo, but that's kind of what you think of him. He has all the moves. And so I'm hoping that they'll bring him along slowly and not push him up the ladder and fight any of the bigger names too early. But they may be forced to push him up the ladder a little faster because he's knocking everybody out in less than a minute. When you start knocking people out that fast, the competition's got to get a little tougher. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens next with Marc Diakiese, because he is that star waiting to jump on the scene. I really recommend you guys go in, and if you didn't get to see this fight, to go back and look at it. As a matter of fact, I would recommend going on YouTube or wherever and checking out his last 3 or 4 fights. It is just spectacular how this guy fights. So that's my take on Marc Diakiese. That concludes my take on and wrap up of the UFC Fight Night, Manuwa versus Anderson out of London. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit of Conor McGregor and some other UFC news and MMA news. We'll be right back.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Okay, and to our last segment, we're going to talk about a little bit of As the World Turned, Guiding Light, General Hospital, the soap opera known as Conor McGregor, Floyd Mayweather Jr. And this fight things are starting to heat up here. It's pretty well set that this fight is going to happen, between hearing everything positive that Mayweather's on board, McGregor's on board, the UFC's on board, Las Vegas, they're willing to sanction the fight. Everything's in line. This fight is going to happen. And over the weekend, McGregor was at a fight with someone, I guess a friend of his was fighting, and he was at ringside, and he ran into Dan Rafael, the ESPN boxing analyst, and apparently, and this is all from seeing this on ESPN. Apparently, when McGregor came ringside, he was saying hi to some of the MMA journalists, that because a lot of MMA journalists actually cover boxing and they cover MMA, and so he was saying hi, and he said hi to Dan Rafael, and then I guess McGregor didn't realize who he was, and then he realized that he was the boxing guy, and later, as the event was over, McGregor realized who he was, and he came back over to him. And I guess McGregor had some serious words to say to him. And, I mean, I guess it got pretty heated. And so he had a pretty extensive statement, because Dan Rafael had said that the fight, pretty much in so many words, would be a joke. It would be just a show that McGregor would have no chance whatsoever. It would be less than an exhibition, that this was not going to be a competitive fight. And one of the things, as I I was reading this here, and it says, trust me on that. Look at me in the eyes. He's 28 years old, confident, and is an expletive, long, rangy, dangerous, in every hand. Trust me, I'm going to stop Floyd Mayweather. You're all going to eat your words. You know, he and that was McGregor as he was yelling at Dan Rafael that he is going to stop him. The whole world is going to eat their words. It's getting close. Don't worry about it. You'll hear about it. And he's just telling him how he's going to stop Mayweather. And I said this in the last episode, and I'm going to say it again. Do I think McGregor's going to win? I don't. Do I think this fight's gonna be a lot tougher than a lot of people think it's going to be? I absolutely do think it's going to be a lot tougher. Do I think McGregor has a chance? And this is, like I said, I've said this before. I'm a big Floyd Mayweather fan, but McGregor's 28. Floyd Mayweather is 40. Mayweather hasn't fought in going to be getting close to 2 years, and I don't believe he's been training either. Skills eventually erode, and you have a situation where McGregor has proven that he doesn't need to land a lot of punches. Mayweather is the greatest defense fighter in the history of boxing, and in my opinion, he's the greatest fighter of all time. And I mean, that's no offense to any other fighter out there, but I truly think he's the greatest fighter to ever step in the ring. But Father Time and that old cliche about being undefeated, he is undefeated. And McGregor doesn't need to land punches and bunches. It's kind of like the Jimi Manuwa fight earlier. You only need one shot. And is it out of the question that he can't land that hand once? I say he has the power to do it. I do think he has the power to hurt Mayweather. I don't think it's going to happen. I think he's going to win. I think it's going to be a 12-round decision. I don't see Mayweather knocking him out strictly because of the fact that McGregor is going to be the bigger man. He's going to be the taller man. He's going to be the guy with the longer range and the longer reach. And so that makes it a little easier for him to get toward Mayweather. I don't see Mayweather hurting him. I see Mayweather stinging the hell out of him, though. And I see Mayweather winning a unanimous decision. But if somebody told me that there was a shot landed and McGregor won, I wouldn't be overly shocked. And I think I'm the only one that I can find that has said this. But I would not be shocked if McGregor landed, because McGregor, like I said, McGregor has that long range. He has the big frame. Everyone knows McGregor has the power. And so, and you just add a little bit of age on Floyd, just a little bit, just enough that he can land a shot, and it can be a compelling story. Now, how crazy would it be for the greatest fighter in history to go 49-0 against the best boxers in the world and lose to a non-boxer? That would be the biggest blemish in history. I think Mayweather looks at this as a winning situation. There's no way he can lose. It's an easy pickup of another $100 million, but this is a much more dangerous fight than I think he realizes, and that's another reason why I give McGregor a chance, because I don't think Mayweather gives him a chance. I don't think his dad, his uncle, any of the sports writers give McGregor a chance. And that's the biggest mistake that everyone makes with Conor McGregor, all the way up until recently, is no one really gives him a chance, but he keeps proving everyone wrong. And this could be another one of those situations. I'm done. I'm done doubting Mystic Mike. I think he has a shot. I still got Mayweather winning by decision. But no, I would not be shocked if he won. So that is my take again on the Mayweather Conor McGregor fight. A couple other things I want to talk about before I go. The UFC announced that Yair Rodriguez, who just came off of a spectacular demolishing of BJ Penn, is and the legend getting another future legend, the number 2 rated fighter in the division. He's fighting Frankie Edgar. You have a situation where Rodriguez could be another fighter who went from nobody knows who he is, not even ranked or barely ranked, to contending for the world title in the same year. Because if he wins this fight against Frankie Edgar, he's arrived. And if he wins against Frankie Edgar, he is going to be the next one up for a title shot. And so I'm really looking forward to this fight here, just to see kind of what we get here. And Rodriguez is a spectacular fighter. So I'm looking forward to seeing how he does. Another fight that was announced is Anderson Silva had talked about how he wanted to fight Michael Bisping or GSP or Diaz. And after Kelvin Gastelum took care of business this past couple weeks ago, actually, yeah, it's been a couple weeks ago, now he asked for Anderson Silva. And at first I thought, like, no, that fight's not going to happen. Within a few days after that, I was shocked to find out that Gastelum and Anderson Silva are going to fight. And I think this is, initially I was not happy about this fight. I thought this was a bad decision on the UFC's part. I thought it was a bad decision on Anderson Silva's fight side as well. But then I thought about this. I think the UFC is looking at this as, if Gastelum wins against Anderson Silva, you have a future star. I believe he's 25 years old. He's a young fighter. You have a star on your hand, a young superstar in the making. If he loses to Anderson Silva, it's no big deal. He's a young star. He can bounce back from the loss. But if he wins, the UFC is loading up with a bunch of young studs, and I think that's what the Yair Rodriguez, Cody Bandit, or Gastelum here. They all are young guys who could be future stars in the UFC. Now, when I look at this and I say, on Anderson Silva's side, what does this do? Well, he wanted to fight Diaz. I don't know when Diaz is ever going to fight any of the Diazes. Mama Diaz, I don't know. None of them. I don't know when any of them are going to come out and fight again. They keep turning down fight after fight after fight. So you can check off the Diazes. They're not fighting. He wanted to fight the winner of Michael Bisping and GSP. Well, they're not going to give them that right out the gate. But he can get into UFC 212 in Brazil, in front of his hometown. If he comes off with a spectacular win here, how do you not give the greatest fighter of all time another title shot if he rings off another win? So the first one I thought it was a bad decision. I think it's a win-win situation because I think it's a good spot for Anderson to get right into the title picture, and it's a good way for Gastelum to actually announce he's here. So I really like this fight. I'm looking forward to seeing UFC 212. That is one card that is going to be a spectacular card to watch. And then you also, so you have that situation. You have UFC 211. That's going to be another spectacular card. So I am really looking forward to seeing what goes on over the next few major events. With that, this is concluding another episode of the MMA podcast. Thank you for tuning in. And again, to all, a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts MMA Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.